This is your fault. Every asshole. This is your fault. It is your fault. This is your fault. Hey, easy. This is your fault.
Tonight, I want to speak to what we do know. A former president was shot, an American citizen killed, while simply exercising his freedom to support the candidate of his choosing. We cannot, we must not go down this road in America.
Hey everyone, this is Will, and welcome to this brand new and exciting episode of The Missing Piece. From pointing fingers to the media, and the screaming, and also of course the blaming, and all the way to the assassination attempt upon the former US President Donald J. Trump, and of course if you follow the news closely, that this week unofficially kicked off this Republican convention. What is happening today in the US drew the attention worldwide. It's not just about this political debate and this political competition between the Democrats and Republicans. It's really about the temperature the nation feels right now. Right after what happened to former US President Donald Trump, sitting US President Joe Biden made a statement and strongly condemned this incident. And of course, he said, and I quote, "I'm grateful to hear that he's safe and doing well. I'm praying for him and his family and for all those who were at the rally. There's no place for this kind of violence in America. We must unite as one nation to condemn it." And on top of all that, and former candidate for the vice president, Tim Kaine, also shared a message on social media. It says, right now, more than ever, leaders need to step up and show that we can treat all with respect. What does that mean when we look at all those messages? And how should we understand this person, Donald Trump, after this assassination attempt? And also, what about the opportunity for Joe Biden? And some still believe that he will be replaced before this Democratic convention, or some believe that Joe Biden still should be the only nominee for the future for the country. Putting everything together, these questions shall be answered. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great honor to invite our distinguished speaker. Again, if you follow our show closely, you know Dr. Michael Patrick. Again, Dr. Patrick has been a well-known journalist and he traveled internationally, and previously he covered multiple political campaigns, especially presidential campaigns. Well, Michael, and welcome back to The Missing Piece.
Well, thank you, Will, and thanks for having me on the show. It's been a rock and roll period of time in presidential politics and in other events going on in the world. I mean, Gaza is still going on. I haven't seen a story on Gaza in a long time on the major media. There is so much going on that we kind of forget that half of the rest of the world is in chaos too. It's not just the culture wars in the United States. So it's been it's a very tense period of time. A lot of changes going on in both parties. So it's very interesting to see what's pulling out, what's going to come together, how these change. I think we had anticipated something, but it's really getting the juices going, getting people paying attention. A lot of big decisions in the offing.
Well, Michael, I want to get started. Just right before our interview, I read an article briefly. Now, the article talked about after this assassination attempt upon former US President Donald Trump, at the convention, more people believe that Trump today, it's a new person. We're not looking at a candidate, or we're not looking at a person who used to be so competitive, loud on social media, again, tend to get the attention of the whole world. But after what happened at the campaign rally, Donald Trump today is different. He's more humane, more emotional, and also believe that he is the only person or God-appointed person not only to save the Republican Party, but also the future of the country. Let's start from there. What do you say to that?
Well, I've been around in politics a while, and I remember when Ronald assassination attempt was made on Ronald Reagan. As many as 12 or 13 U.S. presidents have had assassination attempts. And one of the things that people said after the assassination attempt on him, and he took a bullet in the chest, and had quite a sense of humor, by the way, in the hospital and around that event. But they said some things changed with him, that there was a sense of resolve, and that he was much more, in a way, pulled together and with a sense of vision and mission and purpose following that event. And I'm leaning so far towards the idea that Donald Trump isn't changing. What he is he's becoming more of a sense of meaning and purpose and gravitas about what he's doing. And you see that in his manner a little bit. When he was attacked, his reaction was extraordinary. He didn't just stay on the ground and fall apart while they hurried him off the stage. He stood up like a lion, and he stood up and pumped his fist in the air and said, "Fight, fight, fight." And you realize this was somebody who was roaring, a lion that was roaring. And he is, and whether you agree with his politics or not, this is someone who has a clear sense of purpose, more than just running for office. I sense something in him, a calmness, perhaps. I think he has told his staff, we're going to stick to the issues. We're staying out of personal politics. The Democrats have got their hands full. That's a whole nother talk about what's happening among the Democrats, and I've been writing on that recently. I just think that we're going to see a different Trump in a little way, in some respects. The courts have, by the way, he's had a couple of major victories in the courts in the last couple of weeks. So things are changing on the ground. His choice of a vice presidential candidate, I think, is going to greatly benefit the ticket, because things are shifting on the ground all the way around, and I think Trump is. I think there's some changes in Trump, and I'm interested to see what holds up and what actually takes place.
Of course, Michael, you know that this week, the official Republican convention kicked off on Monday. And of course, on the first day, as you mentioned, he officially announced the vice presidency candidate is J.D. Vance. But meanwhile, I want to turn into a short article on Political, and the title drew me attention as well. And I quote, it's called, "Blood Turns to Martyrdom as Republicans Rally Around Trump. The incident served to reinforce one of the pillars of Trump's image, strength." Of course, the article went on to say that the strength is not just about Donald Trump, and it shows the strength of American citizens, and it shows the strength of American spirit. Now, from your perspective, again, as you mentioned before, you covered multiple presidential elections in history. How should we understand the word strength at this moment? I have to be honest that before this assassination attempt happened or took place, throughout the media, if I can grab all the keywords together and put in the box, and that could be summarized by two words: extreme polarization or extreme division. Now, after what happened to Donald Trump, do you still believe, or can we say, that the temperature of the political atmosphere in the US today has changed, or it's on the way to be changed? It's no longer or less divided, and we need to be more unified so that we're not going to see the weakness of the country, but instead start to see the strength, or even perhaps this political fairness for the country. What do you say to that?
Well, I think we are deeply divided in values and outlook. I don't think that the division changes. I think that we are going to see in terms of how the issues are played out. What do the Democrats do when they have a candidate who is having trouble putting sentences together, is very vulnerable, people aren't going to trust him, and so what do they have to focus on? And I think they're going to be mission focused on what's called Project 25, which was a 900-page document from the Heritage Foundation, a think tank, that they believe outlines a good measure of what Trump will try and do as president should he be elected. And I think they fear that's as likely as any as ever. When you see Trump, when he came walking out and he had that white patch on his ear. Excuse me, I get the right side of my head. When he had that white patch on his ear, it made him both vulnerable and strong. It made him a wounded warrior. And I think the imagery of what we're seeing right now definitely gives the edge causes people to rethink Trump a little bit. I think the momentum is definitely in Trump's favor. Had the Democrats elected a new team, maybe they would have had enough time. If we look at France, we look at Great Britain, they're having elections. It doesn't take that long to put a candidate up and make some significant changes in elections. So it doesn't take forever. You can get these things done. But in the way it is unfolded, they're pretty well stuck with Biden, for better or worse, right now. I don't think you're going to see any changes. There's no movement on the ground, and it would take movement on the ground to change it. They're not going to use the 25th Amendment for an incapacitated president or any kind of wild moves against him in that regard. But as long as Biden is sticking to his guns, which he appears to be, he will be the nominee. But unless he can actually convince the public that he's got the strength to do 4 more years, even if they like him, I think the culture war is pretty fierce. I do not think that's the end of the problems we're going to see as we march forward. There were people outside the RNC convention saying, "Well, I'm sorry that he didn't get hit harder. I'm sorry he's still alive." There were a lot of stuff going on in the crowd, people saying irresponsible things. But I think it has tempered the conversation for a while. I think you're going to see both sides temper it for a while, but the Democrats are going to focus on the issues that they think provide the evidence for why they think the country would be in horrible condition if Trump becomes president, because he's going to dismantle much of that woke state, and that appears to be one of his missions. Now, Trump is distancing himself from the Project 25 collection of ideas, but nonetheless, it's a radical change coming. They know it, and that's what they're going to talk about, and perhaps tone down some of the rhetoric, like it's time to put a target on Trump's back. Those kind of statements, I think we're going to see people be far more circumspect about, because people right now, this is Trump's time to shine this week, and I think he's going to do it. What the Democrats do with the Democratic National Convention, I think they can shine. They can do some things. But this is serious work now, because they've got to make this candidate hold up. And so far, even in the weeks following the debate, he's not been able to deliver on that note. And the momentum has been moving towards Trump, with winning court cases being tossed out, and things are moving on a variety of fronts. Plus, Trump's choice of vice president is going to help him tremendously. I'm not sure Kamala is going to do an equal amount of heavy lifting for Biden. So this is a very fascinating election this year. But I don't think we're past the animosities that are running pretty deep and brought us to this point.
Michael, speaking of this is the opportunity for Trump to shine, we have to bring another person into our conversation. Again, we all follow political news closely. Back in 2016, he was one of the quote allies to President Trump. But in 2024, or even as soon as the whole Republican campaign kicked off, he changed his position. He became a big naysayer for President Trump, who is the former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie. And just recently, he was also invited to join the interview to talk about this assassination attempt and also talk about his choice to pick J.D. Vance to be the vice president. Now, the question very simple to you, Michael, is how much does Chris Christie's voice matter at this moment? So in other words, how do you think that Trump and also the entire Trump team or even the voters going to handle the naysayers at this moment? I mean, again, granted, I'm sure that Chris Christie is not the only one who still criticized Trump's behavior, who still criticized that J.D. Vance and even everything that he does or they will do for the country. We can't silence those people, and they're out there, and they're being loud, and they're being invited to the media from the left to the right. So from your perspective, how much do their voices matter? And also, why do you think they're still holding such, again, I don't want to use the word resentful, but let's just use the word dissatisfying attitude towards Trump and towards the Republican Party, and also still believe that there could be a better option rather than Donald Trump? What do you say to that?
Well, Chris Christie is an expert on inside baseball. He is part of the system that exists. And that's, in fact, one of his weaknesses in the minds of the public. That's where when you try and analyze why J.D. Vance Jr., Senator from Ohio, yes, he's well placed. He's got a lot of positives in his background, but he comes across as someone who understands the average American and what they've gone through. He's been poor. I mean, seriously poor. Changed his name 3 times. People ask me, who's JD? What's JD stand for? Well, if you look into it, you find out from his book and from the the movie made by Netflix, that he changed his name 3 times due to the stuff going on in his family and drug abuse and his mom. He knows where people live. And that is, he doesn't try and wear that on his sleeve and try and go around and say, hey, I'm the candidate that was poor once. That's not his personality type, but people will relate easily to him, whereas they might be a little more off with Trump, but they're going to give him a shot. I'm talking about the general voting public out there. Now, I think one interesting person to always keep an eye on are independent candidates. If we look back at when Hillary ran against Trump, she won the popular vote, but she lost the college that determines who actually becomes president, okay, the Electoral College, by a few votes. And the person who took some votes away from her in that process was Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who is an independent still out there. And I think that while that only may be 1 or 2% in this election, that could be an interesting turn of events. And right now, it's not looking very much in favor of. He has criticism for both parties, but I think it could hurt Biden. It could be one of those in those side issues that could hurt Biden a little bit. They've got to keep the focus on plugging the dike of this culture change that has been put into place through Trump on all kinds of important levels. And it is a major change. And there are values associated with that, families split apart over some of those issues. And they've got to reinforce the issues, even if they can't play Biden as their strong card. they've got to be very forceful, and that's why you're going to hear them talking a lot about Project 25 and key issues and painting Trump and the others is on the wrong side of the issues and heading in the wrong direction. And they'll cover. There's lots of issues that can be talked about. So I think that's what we're going to see driven in the campaign. But quite frankly, in the middle of the culture wars, it's a split field. And the Republicans have a lot going for them. But I think it's that image right now of the kind of president people want, someone they can count on, who gives them a sense of assurance that things are going to be good and going to be okay. I think that's a role that we could see Trump moving into, along with J.D. Vance, in a way that's going to be hard for Biden to be the only one speaking against that. So I think we're going to see a more full force effort by multiple people speaking on behalf of Biden to try and get through this period of time, secure the election, and then maybe they can change him out later. But quite frankly, this is an uphill battle right now, and it's a culture war, and it's still hot and hotter than ever, I think.
Michael, I want to move on our conversation. Let's talk about President Biden. Of course, after the first debate with Donald Trump, Democratic Party panicked. I mean, big time. Oh, Lord. I mean, again, I turned on the news. I saw clip after clip after clip that pretty much everyone was very disappointed. And of course, the team members were saying, well, they tried to cover up that he had a lot of campaign rallies, he was tired, and he did not sleep well. But with all the excuses putting together, people were very concerned about Biden's performance, and especially if there's going to be a second debate in September between Trump and Biden again. Now, with that said, it's rather dangerous to assess what's happening to the Biden's team. But also, Michael, you mentioned something, again, very critical. The Biden recently invited all the NATO allies in coming to Washington, D.C. to celebrate the 75th anniversary or the birthday for NATO. He actually pronounced or called President Zelensky Putin.
And now I want to hand it over to the president of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin.
We understand that he used the wrong words. He started a campaign rally during the debate. That was all understandable if we can let it go. But in front of Zelensky, they addressed him as Putin. Of course, for Zelensky, he brushed it off easily. But for the rest of the world, we're saying you couldn't differentiate between Putin and Zelensky at this moment. I mean, we've been talking about the Russian war for years. So I want to know. Let's start from there, from your reaction. What does that say about Biden if he cannot even distinguish? And again, maybe there's no teleprompter, maybe there's no one wrote a short note on this hymn to say, please don't say the wrong name, etc. But again, how do you think the world can assess that when the war in Ukraine still takes place, that the U.S., the president, mispronounced the name of the partner, but instead calling him to be someone that almost half of the world can understand? What do you say to that?
Well, that's only the gaffes that get publicized on a regular basis. But look, this is a very relatable situation in some ways because we all have that uncle. We all have that aunt. We all have that family member who has struggled with trying to say anything coherent. And we've all seen this. We've lived with it. I mean, I had a parent, a stepmother who passed away from dementia and saw all of the different shades of it. And we recognize this. This isn't something we haven't seen before, actually within our own families. So I don't think, while people may believe strongly in the values he holds and believe he's done a good job as president and are prepared to vote for him, they're going to question whether or not he can actually pull this off. And That's why I am still a little bit mystified by why they felt they couldn't bring in a strong team at the convention. And who knows? We're not there yet. We're not at the convention yet. But right now, everything seems to be lining up. All the signals are lining up that he's going to stay in the job and stay the course, as it were. And he's going to have to be able to go out there without a teleprompter and speak at some point to engender any kind of level of support. I personally think it's they've crossed the river on this issue. And I don't think they're going to pull that out. But what they may do is, if a strong enough team gets around him and doesn't throw him under the bus, he might be able to put up a good front. But right now, that Team Trump and Vance, they are hitting the home runs right now. In image, we're talking about, coming out on stage, and he's got his reminder that he's vulnerable, but at the same time, he's a lion. So, people are looking at all of the troubles going on in the world, and Putin and Ukraine, which is close to me, here in terms of that particular issue. There's a lot that needs a strong leader, and not one that is kind of like working off cue cards that tell him how to enter the stage and exit the stage. They really need a strong leader, and that's what people are going to choose, even if they don't like the individual. Who's going to mellow out that image is going to be J.D. Vance. And so we say, yeah, but he's a wild man. Well, yeah, he is. But in terms of Trump, he's the guy. That's why I think one of the reasons he chose Vance is going to help calm down some of the troops that have been very nervous about Trump, because Vance didn't always support Trump, and this has been publicized, and the word's out there. He didn't always support him, but he has pretty thoroughly, including one of the court cases that got thrown out was over Trump trying to overthrow the last election, and that has been tossed out, that particular case, because of a Supreme Court ruling. And so people are going to have to back up a little bit. They're a little concerned, not a little concerned, they're drastically concerned about the changes to government and how it operates once Trump is in office. He's not going to come in and he can't run again. So if he wins this time, expect to see the full force of Donald Trump and J.D. Vance changing things. This is not going to be a minor change. It's going to be a major cultural eruption. And so I don't think we've seen the end of what's going to roll out soon. And then there's all the other unknown factors. What does this mean for China? What does this mean for Gaza? What does this mean for Ukraine? All of those questions have to be answered. And right now, the answers aren't clear, at least coming out of the current Biden administration. So this is going to be a difficult time.
Michael, I want to wrap up our conversation by asking you the last question. Let's talk about China. Recently, there were a lot more reports and articles came out, especially from the perspective of J.D. Vance, his attitude towards China. I mean, Bloomberg published an article years ago that during one interview that J.D. Vance actually mentioned the biggest threat to U.S. today is China. I mean, again, we've seen this political rhetoric, the economic tariff from President Trump during his first term presidency. And also we've seen this hot and cold relationship between the Chinese leader and Joe Biden, again, multiple occasions. But right now, people are very concerned, especially across the aisles, and looking at how J.D. Vance is going to, I guess, not the word represent, not the word delegate, but hopefully can manage the relationship between U.S. and China. But so far, based on J.D. Vance's previous records and previous political interests, that he sees, or maybe perhaps he still believes, that China is a threat to the U.S. So, Michael, again, you live in both countries and you travel internationally. So I want to ask you, the last question is, how do you think that today people and the citizens outside the U.S. who are still interested to build a healthful and a positive relationship for China and US to assess the rhetoric from JD Vance. I mean, ultimately, he is going to be the next vice president for the country if Donald Trump were to be elected. So how do you think that people outside US able to understand and handle that JD Vance, his attitude or perhaps his opinion about China? What do you say to that?
Well, I think what you're going to see in J.D. Vance is a more traditional vice president. They're not going to hide him in the kitchen like Biden did with his vice president. But I think what he's going to be more seen but not heard. I think he's definitely going to have enough of a time just coming alongside and supporting Trump. I think he's going to not be setting policy and giving critical speeches. I don't think you're going to see that role in him. His cred, he as a freshman senator, and the book and the movie and the life, and he's got a life story that's amazing. That's all domestic target. That's all domestic audience. That's where he's going to be speaking. Now, in terms of China, we have to look at, I think Biden recently, was pushing 100% tariffs on electric cars against China and really trying to show himself that he can be strong and he can stand up against threats. I don't want to take that apart right now, but pretty significant when you start talking 100% tariffs against China. The worst that you could see in Trump was Trump talked about 60% tariffs. I don't think we're going to see Trump out picking fights. But neither one of them have kind things to say about China right now, because during an election year, every message is about what are my audiences thinking? What are my voters thinking? They're not delivering messages to change policy in China or anywhere else. They're sending messages that need to resonate with the voters at home. Now, there's been some conversation also about who owns land and who can buy land in the United States, and that gets back to sovereignty issues, and that'll probably play a small role in the conversations that are taking place. And perhaps you might hear Vance come out and say some things to some farmers. But basically, I don't think you're going to see Vance out on the foreign policy trail right away. I think he's going to be used for what he's built for, which is the domestic audience and the domestic voters. That's where he's going to be. And Trump is not the person to share the spotlight. So you're going to see a very strong president that's going to stir up enough trouble on all fronts as he steps into office that I am expecting to see Trump do the art of the deal kinds of conversations and to rekindle some relationships. So I think there could be a new period of time of people beginning to talk again. And but until this election is over, that anything that's said about China is being said for domestic consumption. And so I don't expect anybody to be putting out any olive branches right now. But I think that Trump will prove the kind of person that they might at least know what's coming. Because foreign policy, Biden may have said some crazy things because people felt that it played well at home. But Biden is not it hasn't been calling a lot of the shots for a long time in foreign policy. I think they're going to try and come around and keep him from saying anything wild and push other people to the forefront on the domestic and this culture war. And that's really what this is. And so the culture war is what you have to focus on to know where the movement will be. I couldn't tell you who's going to be better for China or not, because quite frankly, I haven't sorted out who's on first, what's on second with the Democrats, and I'm not sure they've figured it out yet either. I'm kind of waiting to see who weighs in for the Democrats in any kind of coherent way and when.
Well, Michael, it's been a great conversation. Thank you so much for doing this.